dialogue. I also appreciate the presentations shown today that reflects the reality of the grave situation. I'm particularly pleased to be here because this is not simply another discussion on the Rohingya crisis. It is a moment of reflection. It is a moment of reckoning. And most importantly, it must be a moment for renewed action. The title of today's dialogue is deeply significant. A decade of Rohingya crisis from humanitarian response to sustainable solutions. 10 years, indeed a long time. For a government, it is a policy cycle. For an institution, it is a planning horizon. But for a child growing up in a refugee camp, 10 years is a childhood. For a young person, it is an education lost. For a family, it is a decade without a home. And for an entire community, it is a generation living in uncertainty. We must not allow 10 years to become 20. Ladies and gentlemen, since the massive influx of 2017, Bangladesh has kept its borders and hearts open. More than 1.2 million forcibly displaced Rohingyas are now sheltered in Bangladesh. We have provided food, shelter, healthcare, education, protection. And we have done so despite our own development challenges, despite limited land, despite high population density, despite enormous pressure on our infrastructure, environment, public services, and host communities. Why? That was our humanitarian choice. That was our moral responsibility. Bangladesh's humanitarian response has also been rooted in a long tradition of compassion and responsibility. In 2017, when the latest influx began, late Prime Minister Begum Khaleda Zia was the first among the political leaders who made statement for the Rohingyas to be allowed refuge in Bangladesh on humanitarian grounds. Bangladesh also draws on earlier experiences under the leadership of Shahid President Zia Rahman in 1978 and late Prime Minister Begum Khaleda Zia in 1992, repatriation was successfully pursued. The circumstances today are considerably way more complex. Nevertheless, the principle remains unchanged. Bangladesh will continue to pursue a dignified and sustainable return of the Rohingyas through both bilateral and multilateral engagements. But humanitarian generosity must not become an excuse for international inaction. Bangladesh can provide shelter, Bangladesh can provide humanitarian assistance, Bangladesh can help preserve dignity, but Bangladesh cannot resolve a crisis that Bangladesh did not create. Distinguished guests, the humanitarian situation remains extremely serious, funding is declining, needs are not. The 2026 Joint Response Plan has already been reduced, yet the humanitarian needs remain immense. Food, nutrition, wash, education, protection are not luxuries, they are lifelines. Any major funding gap will have consequences for the Rohingyas, for the host communities, for camp stability, and ultimately for regional stability. We therefore urge our international partners, do not let humanitarian fatigue become humanitarian abandonment. The world has many crises, we understand that, but a protracted crisis does not become less urgent simply because it becomes less visible. Ladies and gentlemen, there is another dimension that we must...
ভবিষ্যৎ হোক নিরাপদ, বিনিয়োগ হোক বিশ্বস্ত, আর আমার পছন্দ সল্ট বে।
Welcome to Salt Bay.
The people of Cox's Bazar have carried an extraordinary burden. They have shared their land, resources, and communities. Their livelihoods have been reflected, their environment has been strained. Their public services have become under pressure. Their generosity must not be taken for granted. Support for the host communities is therefore not an optional addition to the humanitarian response. It is an essential part of it. But let me also be clear, humanitarian assistance is necessary, but it is not the solution. We really appreciate the contribution our friends and partners like European Union and others are making. But the Rohingya crisis originated in Myanmar. Its sustainable solution must ultimately be found in Myanmar. The ultimate objective is the safe, voluntary, dignified, and sustainable return of the Rohingyas to their homeland in Rakhine State. This is not simply a policy preference, it is the only sustainable way forward. The Rohingya people themselves have repeatedly expressed a desire to return home. We must listen to them, we must respect their aspirations also. A refugee camp should never become a permanent substitute for a homeland. We also need to move forward on verification. The verification process must be expedited on the basis of the agreed bilateral instruments, taking into account children born in the camps. It must also take into account those who have arrived from Rakhine since 2017. Accurate data is essential. Credible verification is essential, and a credible verification process can become an important confidence-building measure between the two sides. That is why Bangladesh remains committed to engaging constructively. We will continue to work through bilateral channels, through the United Nations, through regional mechanisms, and with our international partners. China is also here today. I believe that the commitment that the Chinese president made this time during our Honorable Prime Minister's visit will reflect in their actions also. Ladies and gentlemen, but responsibility sharing must mean more than expressions of sympathy, more than statements of solidarity. It must translate into action, predictable financing, sustained diplomacy, political engagement, and accountability, and ultimately into a durable solution. 10 years ago, Bangladesh responded to a humanitarian emergency. Today, we are confronting a protracted political crisis. The present government, under the able leadership of Prime Minister Tariq Rahman, is confident that as Bangladesh successfully pursued repatriation in 1978 and 1992, under the leadership of late President Zia Rahman and Prime Minister Begum Khaleda Zia, we shall also be able to repatriate the Rohingya to their homeland. You are not merely reporting the crisis. I am talking to the media today. You are helping shape how the world understands it. Responsible journalism matters, evidence matters, facts matter, and responsible reporting can help prevent the crisis from disappearing from the international agenda. I therefore welcome the workshop for diplomatic correspondence and senior journalists being organized alongside this dialogue. This is the transition we need, from relief to resilience, from solidarity to responsibility sharing, from humanitarian management to political action, and ultimately from displacements to dignified return. Let me conclude with one simple message. 10 years should not become 20. The Rohingya people deserve more than survival. They deserve a future, they deserve a home, they deserve a safety, they deserve dignity, and they deserve the right to return to their homeland in peace.